Hello, and thank you for joining me tonight for Inside the Process. This live stream is a little different than what we do on Tuesday night. In fact, quite a bit different. One, I opened my mouth, which is always a wild card. But I want to bring you inside my world. This is an extension of what I was doing until about a month ago on the Mainstay Facebook page called Pandemic Piano, once a month. Now I'm doing it each week. And it'll be about aspects of playing the piano or anecdotes and applicable things, hopefully, from my experiences in my music career. I guess that's what we call it, right? And if you're a musician or not a musician, I hope this will engage you and be interesting. You'll see the support link, and thank you very much to those of you who do support me via the PayPal tip jar, the Patreon kind of alternative tip jar with benefits approach that you might want to take a look at, and the old-fashioned check in the mail way, which still works. And if it can work out, I'd like to keep doing both of these live streams as often as possible. But this one, it is really fun for me in its own way, because I get to share some of my thoughts, and they may be unique takes, or takes that you're not necessarily going to hear everywhere else, because I guess I'm a unique guy. So let's go on, and if I did this right, I listed the comment, and I made the correct date for this, which I will confess I copy and paste the description from the previous video, which means I have to remember to change the date, which I didn't last week, and somebody called me on it. And also we'll fix the title. And the topic for today is, what did I wind up calling it? Oh, the orchestra in a box. And you can probably figure out what box I'm talking about, right? Right here. So let me play a tune, a Duke Ellington tune I really enjoy playing. And maybe with just the title of the topic in front of you, you'll have a sense of how you might listen to this a little bit differently than you might otherwise. Or not, but I hope you like it. Duke Ellington tune called In a Sentimental Mood. And because of the title of the stream tonight, the topic, it kind of influenced the way I played it a little bit. But honestly, you can't influence the way I play too much, because what I do is what I do and how I play is how I play. I don't really have switches that I can flip like a lot of musicians do. We've talked a little bit about this already. That comes from my own process, which is more feeling or emotion or intuition driven than it is decision driven or mentally engaged at the time. Of course, the mind is involved, but it's things that's learned and put into like the second nature slot. So the piano, as you could hear there, although honestly I could have been a little more, I could have gone a little deeper maybe, I don't know, it's hard to be objective. And especially when you're paying attention to what you're playing, because that impedes the process right there. Which actually I can pay attention to what I'm playing if I'm detached from it first. But that's a whole nother topic. The piano is well suited to play by itself. It's one of those instruments that you could say by nature is a solo instrument, although many of the applications of the piano are not solo. And we're going to talk about that in the context of the orchestra in a box. And it's kind of two different worlds, or two different approaches to playing the piano. Whether you're playing it by yourself or you're incorporating it into an ensemble, which is often what happens in popular music and jazz. The piano or the keyboard eventually gets incorporated into the larger thing. But the piano is certainly, or at least can be, a standalone solo instrument. Now, because I am more comfortable than some pianists playing alone, in fact that's really the comfort zone. I do work with rhythm sections, I love it, but I just don't do it very often. That's not how I learned. I was as well suited to weather this pandemic as anybody, and I know how blessed I am for that, and many other reasons. Because of that, I could be myself, which is a solo pianist. And in all of these applications that I'm going to talk about, the constant is the ability of the piano to play the ranges of all the orchestral instruments. And then within that, all the other instruments that have come along, like guitar or banjo, but of course you could say banjo, well technically it's not an orchestral instrument, but I know somebody who's the banjo player when they need one for the Philadelphia Orchestra, or I know him, Pat Mercury. So that is a thing, but if you're going to hear most any kind of non-electronically generated music, naturally generated music, you're going to hear sounds that occur within the range of this piano, and that's really the magic of the piano, that you can be all of those things. You can be the piccolo trumpet. You can be the regular trumpet. You can be the tuba. The French horn section or trombones. Of course, the trick is to be the tuba, the trombones, and the piccolo trumpet, because then you need to go down and play with your nose or use your foot or something. And the 10 fingers thing of the piano, or you can play more notes by doing that, is a cool thing. But if you're being the whole orchestra and the orchestra has more than 10 players, then you're kind of, not out of luck, but you can't do exactly what an orchestra will do. But you get the point. You have all of that possibility. So I want to demonstrate that by going out on a limb for me and playing one page of the piano score, which is technically not an orchestral reduction, but for all intents and purposes it is. And I'll explain the difference. For Rhapsody in Blue. Those of you who know me and have known me for a while and know about the Mainstay Monday series that we had before the pandemic shut it down, I would be able to have guest artists come in every Monday night to the Mainstay and perform a concert with them. And my job was not just to be up there and like MC somebody else playing. I was to be involved and have a unique experience of the intersection of two people. And it was always fun, and I challenged myself with some of these, because you know, and I've said this, I'm not sufficiently wired to be a real classical musician, because I can't memorize the music and it's always running away from me, and so it's hard for me to like stick to the script. But for something like Rhapsody in Blue, I had to stick to the script. And because Gershwin wrote it initially for two pianos, it was all written kind of in a hurry. So he wrote the orchestra part as piano reduction first, knowing it would be expanded. And it was Paul Whiteman's orchestra that did it first. But now you have big old classical orchestras doing it. And somebody arranges the piano part, the second or accompanying piano part for orchestra, but it was what was intended all along. And you're of course used to hearing it with an orchestra, but we couldn't do that at the Mainstay, but we could do two pianos. So I took it upon myself to learn the orchestral part, and I worked on it for many months, just kind of picked at it. And I hadn't played it for quite a while, for several months. And I just decided today, you know, I should do it. Can I still play the first page sufficiently? And the answer is maybe. But I want you to hear this, and the first thing you're going to hear as I miss my bass note, all right, is that little run that's typically done, if you've heard Rhapsody in Blue ever, as a clarinet glissando. You know, clarinet's playing a little bass, and just doesn't do what I did, because I can't bend all those notes, and the clarinet can, right? But just hear this as an orchestra. Don't hear this as a piano as much as you can. And we'll just point out what instruments that I am playing. And I'm going to just take it up to where the piano itself comes in, the featured or first solo piano part, and I'm going to stop. I'm going to be the orchestra, and in order to play fewer wrong notes, I'm probably going to slow it down slightly. It is what it is. What are you going to do? Safe. Phew. All right. So I was consciously hearing the instruments of the orchestra. And if you've heard Rhapsody in Blue at all, maybe you were too. Of course, the clarinet at the beginning. Do. Okay. And there would be probably the lower brass. I should have actually listened to an orchestral version, but French horns or trombones or both, but trombones in there for sure, maybe even the tuba player. Clarinet, I get it. Now all the brass. I'm not sure the strings were involved there, they might be. And here I'm pretty sure it's the French horns. clean more of it up. So the piano, in terms of imitating instruments, which it was never really designed to do, it's just designed to be able to play their ranges, but in the aspect of like imitating, it's been replaced obviously by digital technology, and you could reasonably program this. You can't just play it as I did, because you have to assign different orchestral parts to it. But you could do this on a keyboard in a computer, and come up with a semi-realistic orchestra sound for all this. But the piano, of course, is an acoustic instrument. It was invented in 1709. I've talked about it before in the mainstay page. I'll talk about it again at some other point. With the mechanism of throwing a hammer to the string, which creates benefits and pitfalls. But right now you can hear in there all the instruments. So as a musician, you want to keep that in mind. You don't want to just play these as notes on the page. You want them to say something. Now, you have the advantage here of knowing what the orchestra would sound like. You don't always, because some things are just written for piano, or some things you just play on piano. So let's see. Yeah. So let me play another example, and I'm going to be much more comfortable with this example because I just get to sit and play and improvise and don't have to think about all those black dots that laugh at me on the page. But I want you to hear the same concept. I'm not going to tell you what to listen for. And we're talking, at least to some extent, different instruments that would be behind this, or that I am essentially covering in their ranges on the piano. And that's something I won't talk a lot about today, but all of those instruments that we can cover their ranges on the piano are specific places. You know, your piccolo trumpet, your flute or piccolo up there, your middle brass, you know, your tubas, or string basses, or electric basses. So I've said enough. Let me play this and we'll talk about it. Dave McKenna-esque arrangement of Sweet Georgia Brown. I'm going to come back to Dave McKenna. He's really important in this discussion. So, whether you play exactly what's written on the page, which I sort of did, whether you create your own arrangement or whether you improvise your own arrangement, which just means you create your arrangement spontaneously, you are manipulating, or taking advantage of this aspect of the piano. And as a listener, you are potentially having the experience, whether you're conscious of it or not, of hearing many instruments played simultaneously, all from here. Now, let's dissect for a minute some of what I did there, but also shed some light on me saying create your own arrangement. That's a subject I'm going to explore in more detail in a future week. But if you play piano, or if anybody plays piano, typically you learn first, as did I, although I was improvising from the beginning, basically, I mean simply at first. But you learn to read music and you learn to extract the music from the page. And you can go to the music store or now get online with music notes and order sheet music. And you can buy an arrangement of whatever popular song you want to play. I don't know why I played this. I was trying to replicate like what a piece of sheet music might look like. So let's say somebody took the Rhodes the Rhodes less something, took the Rose and wrote down what notes to play to make an arrangement. Is that like the eternal authored from God way that the Rose needs to be played to be the Rose? And I could say it to any other tune. The answer is absolutely not. In fact, any pop tune that you play, or standard tune that you get sheet music for, is, and even if it's the original publisher, or even if it could be the original author of the tune, but usually it's somebody who writes a piano arrangement, it's somebody's interpretation of how to play it on the piano, and it's written down. And some people who are putting their music out there, even people who play like early jazz and stuff, have preset arrangements, and they probably write it down, and then they practice it like classical music. And those people, I can think of one person in particular. She's very, very good. I'm not going to name a name just to be safe and fair. And you know that when she started, and up until now it's changing, I think, but she was taking all of her music from arrangements, probably written arrangements and transcriptions. But now I see this person online and doing their own arrangements of tunes. But they're going to be certainly thought out and kind of practiced. Some improvisation. But that's one way to play. You can read somebody's arrangement. You can write your own arrangement if you're skilled enough. And that's one of the things, if I'm teaching a student who's working on the idea of playing by ear, the thing we're going to talk about is, okay, how are you going to arrange that for the piano? Whether you write down your arrangement, which I've had to do with one of my teachers, or whether you learn how to improvise. But anyway, it's an arrangement. So enough said about that. The specific thing I did with Sweet Georgia Brown, I was doing a little chunky thing like this. And what I was kind of imitating was the low note, like the tuba or the string bass. I like to do that quarter note strum thing. I'm sure, like Dave McKenna would be, I can go into autopilot mode with that, And then I'm more conscious and like judging myself as to what I'm doing with my right hand and my line's making sense. So, you know, my left hand, I mean, you could say these are horns, but now we're playing more like the jazz feel, the rhythmic thing. So you're a bass player, and doing that with one hand is you're limited, and not a lot of guys do it. I mean, if I were brave enough to sing Sweet Georgia Brown, I mean, this would be great, because now I got one hand for my bass player, one hand for my guitar. My guitar's getting fancy. But that has to be reduced into one hand. So again, the guitar, and little detour for the topic, but something I said, you might have said to yourself, what, huh? Because I said I can put this on autopilot. Well, how you put something on autopilot is stop thinking about it. And of course you have to know what you're doing to stop thinking about it. But the best way to stop thinking about something is start thinking about something else, or put something else in front of you. And this is one of the things we'll talk about when we talk about practicing, which I think I did on the mainstay page, but not here. So we're going to talk more about that. That when you take something and put it in your awareness, in that big picture, in that context, it's attached to everything else. So, and I just got distracted by hoping nobody texted me. Okay, and tell me that my stream's not working. Good. And so, and of course you want the artistic expression to be second nature. You don't want to have to like think about each note. You just can't. I can't think about every word I'm saying or how they're spelled or anything like that when I'm talking to you. It has to be part of that same process. So what's in my top of my awareness is what my right hand's doing. Sometimes I will like consider the left hand motions, but when I'm soloing, I'm more looking at my right hand and actually trying not to think about it either, but have an awareness of it and hear like what's going on, and like, am I cool with it? Am I not? I'm letting the left hand kind of play itself. You could reverse that too. If you're a pianist, let's say you're playing classical music. I would tell you, okay, take that passage, and when you have it reasonably learned and you're comfortable with it, play it and focus specifically and only on the left hand. And start like practicing specific things to do with your left hand, and watch the right hand play itself, right? And then turn that around and think about a specific thing with your right hand and watch your left hand play itself. There's all these like micro skills that you develop underneath there. But now you could hear that I was doing more of a jazz thing in terms of the instruments. What was my melody? Could have been a trumpet, could have been a clarinet, could have been the guy whistling, you know. But actually, that would have probably been higher. Now we're Harlem Globetrotters. So, those of you who were old enough, you certainly remember that. And I changed up how I played the left hand rhythmically to imitate that. And when you hear that music, I can't even recall what it's like instrumentally when the Globetrotters play. I just remember there's a whistler. But there's certainly a band underneath. It's probably not just a piano. So, let's do another example. And this one, if my friend Cody Level is watching, he may have a bone to pick with me. So Cody, I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I'm doing the best I can. But Cody had the unique and wonderful experience of spending better part of 5 years on the road, and he's 30 years old, so he been, and it's been a few years since he's been back. So as a young musician, he was out with the Glenn Miller Band full time, the Glenn Miller Orchestra, which at least pre-pandemic, to my knowledge, was the last remaining full-time or reasonably full-time what they call ghost band. You know, they're keeping the big band arrangements and the music alive, but of course the leader's long gone. And so somebody else is being the leader. And Glenn Miller's theme song was Moonlight Serenade. And he had a particular way, and I heard Cody talking about this on his stream. And if you're not familiar with Cody, I shared one of his streams. If you go back a week or maybe a week and a half ago or something, on my post you'll see his Friday night stream that I shared, and check him out. And he told the little account of how Glenn Miller got to arrange in his sort of famous signature way with the clarinet lead on top and the sax section, and where that came from. And that was unique. Most big bands did not do that. But suffice to say, for our purposes, it's the sax section. And I'm not going to play the exact harmonies. And since Cody played this tune because it was Glenn Miller's opening theme, every night that he had a show with the Miller Band, he can probably get up in the middle of the night in his sleep and write out the harmonies, or at least write out his part, but he heard all the other ones play. So Cody, my apologies, I'm just approximating and I'm not playing all the exact chords. But I'm going to just give you an example of, again, playing in a way that represents the instruments of the band. Now, you can play Moonlight Serenade any old way you want. I'd like to do it where it kind of imitates the Miller Band, you know, because I think that's cool. Oops, man. Not a 100% precise replication. I was actually white knuckling. It's like, I hope I remember this because it's been a while since I've done it. But if you're familiar with the original at all, you could tell I was, you know, deferring to it or referring to it or tipping the hat to it by being the instrument. All right. So music, of course, is not just written for orchestra and then adapted to piano. And in fact, piano has its own library, it has its own thing, you know. once the piano was in vogue, everybody wrote for the piano, you know, like, and some people wrote exclusively, almost exclusively for the piano. Right? I mean, all the ragtime music, all the Scott Joplin, all that piano stuff. And among classical composers, the one who was really super crazy piano-centric was Chopin. And he wrote, you know, most exclusively, almost, I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure about this, almost exclusively for the piano. But even when you're playing piano music, you are still referencing kind of the orchestral experience, and that never leaves my frame of mind, whether I'm thinking about a rhythm section that's going, or I'm thinking about the orchestral instruments. Like for example, and then in the bass line, there are 4 instruments that are bass note instruments in orchestra or band settings. One is the tuba. And if I'm playing something that's coming from the space of a tuba, I'm going to articulate it like a tuba player, right? Or the upright bass, or the alternative to a tuba, which you only hear in really trad jazz bands, is a bass saxophone. Doesn't quite cut like the tuba, and you're not going to see like a bass saxophone in a Sousa marching band, because you take 2 guys to carry it and 1 guy to play it. You know, I'm sure there's a contraption you can wheel and play a bass sax, but I don't think that's a standard practice. And then, of course, there's the electric bass, which takes you a whole nother direction. You can play electric bass like you can an upright, but the electric bass kind of brings you into the more modern music. So that's an example of that kind of thinking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play just the A section of a perhaps the most, well, will be the most well-known little Chopin thing. This is certainly one of them. You recognize it. And it's called the Minute Waltz. I take it to mean minute waltz. You know, it's a little waltz, right? Certainly not to be played in a minute, especially if you take the repeats. And I'm gonna slow it down just to point out the little component parts here. And you hear this with the idea of the orchestra, even though this is clearly something written for the piano. Sloppy as, but that'll make the point. But I'm going to play it again. I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to try to just feel this. You know, it's really, for me, it's hard to feel something when I have to think about it. In fact, it's not possible. You know, which is why, and I may have said this before, and I'm sure I'll say it again, which is why, and I never understood this when I was younger, you're always at some point as a classical musician expected to memorize your music. Because once it's memorized, and I already told you that kind of doesn't work for me because I memorized the concept, but once it's memorized, you can just go with, you know, it's programmed inside, it's second nature, and your intuition can take over, and then you can really express it. But there's one thing I want to point out in here, and I'm going to tell you what it is ahead of time. I call it a cello line. And I call it that because I've sort of adopted that approach to playing with the rhythm section when there's a bass player. And somebody had said it to me, you're playing cello lines. I was like, I am. Cool. I like that. So something that I do, Chopin stole from me. Well, not really, but anyway. And sometime you'll hear me play that for my Tuesday night stream. I'm going to play it so that I can improvise on the B section. Once I feel like I'm clean enough. But it's just 4 measures. So when I start this B section, if there were a full orchestra involved, or if I had a third hand to play piano, if there were 2 people playing piano, there would certainly be a basso underneath. And you would get that. Come on, Joe. But for me, really liking linear movement and melodic movement, that's like my favorite part of the whole thing. It's just that little inside movement that a cello player would play. So you could hear the potential of the maybe a pizzicato bass and cellos or violas, or the brass could be involved if an orchestra were to play. But then what's the point? It was written for piano, right? But I'm sure there are versions for orchestras. All right. Now, when you really have potholes in your path as a pianist or keyboard player, is when you start working with other musicians. Now, if you're a classical piano soloist and let's say you perform with an orchestra, you're performing basically something where the orchestra is accompanying you, like the Rhapsody in Blue, and the pianist has lots of solo features, and does play with the orchestra some, but really it's orchestra piano, right? The piano really doesn't integrate. But in jazz, the piano is part of the rhythm section, and when you're playing simultaneously with other people, you cannot play anything you want at any time you want all over the piano, because now there are other things happening. Some of those instruments that you are replicating are also playing, and you can't play on top of them. They won't like you if you do. And I've had that experience many times as a younger musician until I learned how to get out of the way, and that's a whole other topic. But I'm going to play something, and a bigger tip of the hat to the amazing pianist Dave McKenna. If you're not aware of Dave McKenna and you're engaged by me at all, you really need to be aware of Dave McKenna, because he was just like the master of the idea of self-contained solo piano jazz. He passed away, I believe, in 2008. But since then, there's been a lot of YouTube posting, and somebody's actually producing a film, a documentary on him. And if you go to the Dave McKenna website, which I'm not sure of the URL, but somebody has set that up, and you can contribute to the documentary, which is very worthwhile, and you'll see some interesting things. So he was the orchestra. So of course, I'm not playing with the rhythm section right now, so I'm not going to fall in those potholes, but we can still talk about them. But the particular video I want you to look at, this is an assignment, people. There will be a quiz. Well, not really, but go on YouTube and look up Dave McKenna playing Lulu's Back in Town. It was a concert that was filmed overhead, and so you can see his hands. Now the view on the keyboard kind of stops about here, so sometimes when he's walking his bass he's out of view, but you know what he's doing because you can hear it. It's the only thing he can do down there. But sometimes it'll come up in view, but then when his left hand does other things, it comes way up in view. And in the light of talking about like purposefully using ranges of the piano, and I'm going to say to replicate instruments, but I can also say using ranges of the piano that are appropriate for what it is you're playing. We could just say it like that without referencing other instruments. I think you'll get. I think you'll get it. I think you'll be really interested in looking at that. And I'm going to kind of not replicate it. You can't replicate Dave McKenna. But I'm going to play in the same sort of fashion he did. Of course, one thing I'm not going to do that he did, that I couldn't do ever as well as he does, is he played it in half the possible keys. You know, he started in E flat and he worked his way up and played it in every key chromatically between E flat and A. And probably the only thing that kept him from going all the way back and finishing the rest of the 12 keys was that was the last tune of his set, and he probably wanted to take a break. Because you'll see at that one, he gets up and he stops, which is uncharacteristic of Dave McKenna. Typically, when he sat down and play, he will do... I'm not consciously imitating that when I do the Escape from Home hour. It's just kind of comes natural to do it, but that's what he did too. He just went from one tune to the next and never stopped. So anyway, here we go. You get the idea of the tuba and the guitar and the singer or the whatever you want it in the right hand. And then you'll watch Dave McKenna and then you'll forget you ever saw me do it. Okay. Something like that. And watch Dave McKenna do it, and you'll see something similar. And just keep in mind that the guitar and the bass and whatever range you want to put the melody in. And now I'm not referencing orchestral instruments because it's a jazz thing, but it's still the same deal. You are doing what those instruments would do if they were there. So yeah, I did mention this, the idea of the cello lines. So for me, coming up not as a modern or contemporary jazz pianist, I tried to learn once I was in my 20s from a well-respected and great teacher, and it took 3 years of study, and learned that I really couldn't reinvent my intuitive approach to playing. So what pianists do, especially when they're playing with rhythm sections now, like with the bass and stuff, so they're not going to be down there, and a lot of modern jazz pianists don't do that anyway. But you know, they'll, let me see. You know, they'll work on what we call open voicings. And, you know, when you get a voicing, you practice it in 12 keys. And, you know, I could never make that work for me. And I just don't have that vocabulary of voicings because to me it's not an up and down process like this. It's a linear melodic process. So when I come up with a voicing, it's typically because the notes inside have taken me to that voicing. So when I'm playing, particularly with a bass player, this is kind of a roundabout point. You would say I'm going a roundabout way to make my point, but maybe I'm making a roundabout point. That could be the story of my everything. Anyhow, so one person, may have been Max Murray, but some bass player pointed out that with my left hand, rather than just hit chords, I'm doing like moving stuff, but I'm out of the way of the bass player. And sometimes what I'm playing is like harmonizing with the bass player or complementing the line. And I'm a leading tone fanatic. We'll talk about that sometime too. And you can see that. I'm bringing it up because one of the live streams is going to be happening between now and the end of the month is the Showbridgeshires. And I don't have, or I haven't had for the longest time, a situation that I play in with any regularity where I have a full rhythm section. You know, I play a lot with Mike McShane down in Rehoboth, my friend Mike. If you're watching, hey Mike, hey. And you know, Mike and my left hand connect. We call my left hand Jocko just for fun. Because it's the bass player. Okay, but when there's a real bass player playing, I can't do that. You know, no I can't. So I'll do those lines like what happened in the minute waltz. And that's not supposed to be a bass line. That's like a bowed, pretty, or even a vocal line. So that's another assignment. Watch the Showbridgeshire live stream on International Jazz Day, maybe the 30th, the last Saturday of this month. And I think we start at 6 o'clock. I'll have the link to it on my page. I think I've shared the event already. And they do a good job filming there, so watch, you know, me basically stay out of the way of the bass player and do other things, but also there's a guitar player. That's a whole nother thing when you have all that going on. So I'll just say one more thing before I play a final tune. A big adaptation for solo pianists, especially who play like popular music, and one that some of them just cannot wind up making, is to adjust to a rhythm section. Because you have to change the fact that you're referencing all this other stuff, if you are. Because like there's a lot of pianists who are like vocalists, and they accompany themselves. But you get the idea. And in fact, one of the things I've enjoyed doing, and maybe, you know, one or more of these people is actually watching, is to be able to, as a teacher, teach singers to accompany themselves on the piano. Because the first question I have to ask, because it's going to determine everything, are we talking about you playing solo? Or are you talking about you playing with a rhythm section, two different animals, for the reasons I've described? And typically it's solo. Right? And so when that singer with that approach first plays with a bass player, bass player is not necessarily happy. And I can tell you, I've heard many a bass player complain about many a piano player. You know, and but I have to be honest and say, somewhere there, unless he's he was older than me, so hopefully he's still around. I don't know his name. But somewhere there's a bass player who was really complaining about me when I was like 17 or 18. First time I tried to play with a bass player when I was with the Madeira boys that came to a rehearsal. And he just got frustrated with me and left. And because I didn't know how to stay out of his way. So that's something, you know, we all have to learn. We all have to learn to adapt to our circumstances. So all of that being said, I hope that was interesting. I'm going to play one more tune, you know, a bit of a different style. And if you want to listen to it with the idea of like picking out the inner movements and, you know, the fact that it's an arrangement and how I'm doing it, or you just want to forget that I've been yapping for the last hour and just hopefully you'll enjoy the tune, go for it. This is a Michel Legrand tune called Watch What Happens, which I'm always saying to myself when I play the piano, like, what's going to happen now? Let me be attentive. Let me be involved in my own process. Here we go. It's always a bit of a challenge to have both of those brain spaces working in the same live stream. But I hope this was informative. If you're so inclined to follow the link to my website and look around and consider that, much appreciated. And look around the rest of the site. I'm working on making some updates and adding some more of the videos, a few of the tunes from home that I post on my Facebook page, to my website. And go to my schedule. There's some really cool live streams coming up. In this 2 days from tonight, Friday night, I'll be at Hummingbird to Mars, a really cool speakeasy in Wilmington, Delaware, with my friend Sharon Sable. We're putting the finishing touches on our Blossom Dearie tribute show, and we're going to perform that a week from Friday night at the Mainstay, available by live stream. And then the Sunday after that, 2 days after that, I'm going to be at Blue House, which is, in this case, a top flight video studio in the DC area, and we're going to be live streaming. I'm going to be with my friend Beth McDonald and Scott Silver, and Beth is a wonderful singer-songwriter if you don't know her, and always likes to tip the hat to Peggy Lee as well. Scott's a wonderful player. That's going to be a week from Sunday, and then the following Saturday is the Showbridgeshire live stream, and there's also an event a week from Saturday in Chestertown that I don't have details yet, but it's a Chestertown Art Walk, and apparently the Arts and Entertainment District or somebody now has a designated piano, and there's different pianists going to be playing, and I'm there at some point during the day. They're getting that scheduled together, and I'll try to announce it if you are local to me. So thank you so much for being here. I hope this was helpful or engaging, or at least you didn't fall asleep. Take care and thanks so much.